Welcome back, everybody, to the second episode of Collectible Conversations. I am your host, Squeaks, with my co-host over here, Radar. How you doing, Radar?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Squeaks?
I'm hanging in. I got a new setup. We're not just on a green wall today, so I'm excited. I'm pumped. I want to jump right in. I want you to lead us off. Kind of
Ab-
what's our recap looking like since our last episode?
Absolutely. Well, we don't have too much news like we did last week on the whole, I guess, Pokeverse, but we have news from us. So, first, let's start with PWCC. PWCC has listed their auctions for the end of this month. They are ending on Monday, the 28th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I have yet to look at them, but I saw a few Charizards, as we always do. So, looking
Shocker.
looking forward to that and seeing some hopefully new record prices or at least some stagnant prices and keeping this thing moving. Um,
hmm
person,
Now, real
oh,
quick, for anyone that doesn't know out there, PWCC is effectively a middleman company that you can send your cards into them and they will post them up on eBay. The fee generally works out to be about the same as what if you sold it yourself. The big incentive is sending it in. You get all that visibility at one time. Everyone, sends in all their cards, so everyone's watching it to see kind of like, what's all getting put on the market. Maybe some of the big items. Last time I think we had a scroll in there and a Mew
mhm.
orb and all kinds of stuff. So it's just one of those things. Some people would also say that maybe a detractor. That's for a totally other video, but I just kind of wanted to, plug in there so everyone kind
There
of knows what we're talking
is,
about when we mention
yeah,
PWCC.
there is a PSA 10 Mew Orb this time. Last there was a
Oh, the last
BGS
one was
9.5.
GS 95.
Right,
Yeah.
so we'll be looking at that for sure.
hmm
As for myself, Harry Potter has been flying off the shelves. I've been listing my booster boxes to recoup some, or taking some profit from my purchases a while ago. So I've been doing that, and I've been throwing that money right back into Dragon Ball Z. So that's
Oh,
really
okay. So
all I've been doing this
you're on
week.
now. Are you on the Dragon Ball Z hype train for like investing, flipping, or is it just like personal collection kind of thing? Like, kind of, what are you doing with that?
It's always been personal collection. I have a few holes in my sealed box collection, my ultra rare sets, but it's getting hard to ignore the prices at this point. Boxes are getting expensive, cards are getting expensive, so it's now kind of turned into an investment.
hmm Okay.
But that's
Well,
really all I have for my week. What's going on with you?
yeah, my week has been not a typical week. I've spent a lot of time, working on the stream ruins. As I kind of mentioned that we're not just in front of a green wall this time. We actually have a dry erase board. We can do stuff. I've got a couple banners, sheets, stuff like that hanging up. But really just kind of working around here, get all the wire maintenance and everything done, working on camera features. So, I actually you know, I still look like a ghost. I was trying to make myself not look like a ghost, but actually that is just my skin tone, unfortunately. So, but been doing that, still packing, shipping orders and everything. For me in particular, I've seen a kind of a spike in modern cards. Now, most of my modern graded is in CGC, but I have had a few PSA sales as well of just like hyper rares and stuff that had lingered over submissions, but have seen kind of a spike in that realm more so than the vintage. Which we'll talk about that. Vintage has kind of done its thing this year,
Hmm.
so that's been interesting. Legos have been really huge this holiday season, which isn't really that unexpected. Lego has had major supply chain issues this year with COVID in terms of being able to actually get product into the United States and keep it supplied on store shelves. I was just in Target tonight picking up a dry erase board. And I was like, I'm just gonna pop over to the Lego section, and I mean, it is barren. Like there is just nothing there. And so, just having Lego in stock, for any set, it really doesn't even matter what it is. It is just flying off the shelves. But that is kind of just how holiday usually goes with
Hmm.
Lego. So that's kind of been, my week as a whole. Nothing crazy in terms of news. We did get there was a players survey thing that TPCI put out for the competitive community, just kind of surveying people, asking, what where they feel the meta currently stands, how they feel the state of the game is, everything. I think they're just kind of trying to gauge how interested people still are, trying to maybe figure out, how they can navigate, COVID moving into 2021 and
Hmm.
everything like that. Because it is pretty rare that, Pokemon goes directly to the community and asks, and if you guys are actually interested in that, you can jump over to Poke Beach. They have an article up on it, and it's on the surveys posted there through SurveyMonkey. So if you are a competitive player, you can put, that information in there. But Other than that, just kind of going through the motions, getting ready, tying up year end, getting some of this stuff ready so I can really hit the ground running in 2021, not just with the store and everything, but content creation. And I've got a few things I'll announce that are going to be kind of bigger changes and everything moving into 2021. I'm just not quite there yet.
Well,
So,
good, good. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Legos. In the Radar household here, we'll be doing a Lego Christmas, so I got Legos for my brothers and sister, and
oh, that's
it'll be
awesome.
a fun little time. But also, you mentioned Modern, which I guess we can throw in the news as well. Pokemon Center restocked some Hidden Fates, and it flew off the shelves in what, 20 minutes?
Ye- if that, and I think they did it in waves. I know that Raichu and Gyarados tins had went up first, and I mean just sold out like that, and then Charizard came a little later. I think they did put a quantity limit on it this time. I know at least Charizard had a limit of two per
Mm.
customer. I mean, people just do multiple orders and things like that. But I think that actually, and this may have to be a podcast topic of its own, actually, but kind of leads into that bigger discussion of the flipper, the scalper, that's been a hot topic this year, not just in Pokemon, but video games I think has been the biggest one. People trying to get that PS5 or the Xbox Series X, and they go up and they're sold out within 3 seconds.
Yep.
We've the media stories that have taken over about how these groups on Facebook have used bots and collectively worked together to get thousands and thousands of these consoles. There was one group that was found to have profited like $46 million off of console flips and things like that. So
Wow.
it's starting that, yeah, massive. It's starting that larger conversation of, effectively, retail arbitrage, buying it from one place, selling it in another, or, if you go buy the tins from the Pokemon Center, break them down, sell the packs and the promo individually, things like that. And, is that an ethical thing to do? Is it not an ethical thing to do? Does the market just control itself, supply and demand? And, there's always going to be people on both sides of it.
Hmm.
But we did see that with the Pokemon Center, those tins went up and then they were gone.
Was
And
the special
they're back,
delivery
but
Charizard?
that's 3 times the price.
Oh,
What was that?
yeah. Was the special delivery Charizard included yet? Are we still missing that? What's going on there?
No, yeah, we're still missing it, and there's not been any additional Pikachu's that have come out. So it was pretty much that one wave of Pikachu's that happened. Those have been gone, and now everyone is,
Where is it? Where is
Charizard
it?
out.
Charizard.
It's just
Charizard.
Charizard coming.
Charizard, where are you?
Yeah.
Charizard, Charizard. Yeah. So
Yeah.
hopefully, maybe Christmas. Maybe keep an eye out. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just throwing out a guess.
I'm gonna sit there on Christmas Day and tell I can't hang out with you. I gotta see if the Pokemon Center brings up Charizard.
Just refreshing it every 5 minutes.
Yep,
Well,
yep,
that's about it for the news. Let's hop into our topic today, which
yes.
is
The
quite interesting.
the big
It's a big topic, something that fires up a lot of people and also just annoys a lot of people. But we're going to talk about
me.
it.
I'm ready.
Um, we're going to talk about the collectibles market as a whole. What happened in 2020? You could see Squeak's whiteboard in the back. It's a graph of a bubble. You'll see.
If
Obviously, that's
anyone
where
would like a better picture of the graph of a bubble right
this is
there.
where our
This is a
conversation is
very
headed today.
rough drawing. If you're very interested, go to Google Images and type in graph of a bubble.
And this
They
is the
can give
first
you
one.
something that's a little better animated than this. But I'm actually gonna reference this here in a little bit,
Yeah.
to get kind of, give you guys a better idea of some of the things I'm referring to and why I actually think this graph is quite relevant.
Hmm.
Even though maybe the market as a whole was or was not in a bubble. So
Right. Well,
what happened this year? I want your take. I
yeah.
want you to start it. You start it. What's your take?
Well, I mentioned, we were going to talk about collectibles as a whole, but I think, there's two main industries here that kind of led the way, and that's sports and Pokemon. So
Sure.
coming into 2020, prices, at least on Pokemon, were moving at a healthy growth. I mean, I saw this opportunity to sell in the early stages of the year. We had, yeah, again, healthy growth right there on the graph. A big economic scare with COVID coming in, and that's where I decided to sell a lot of things.
Mhm.
But I think the number one key factor here of what happened and why the economy didn't crash is that people sat at home, had nothing to spend money on, started getting money from the government, and decided to get into their nostalgic feels. I mean,
Mhm.
I it's the most comparable thing here for me is the reason that I got back at the Pokemon was because I was stuck at home. I was sick. I was going
Mhm.
through issues, right? And I got stuck at home. So what could I fill my time with? And that was just looking at Pokemon, finding it on YouTube, looking on eBay. And I've had that conversation with many other people on my other podcast that you go through this kind of darker time in your life, you get stuck to yourself, you get nostalgic, you rediscover Pokemon. Now the entire world was kind of forced into that where they were stuck at home, weren't able to go anywhere by themselves or with their significant other that they either found out they loved a lot more or hated a lot more than they thought, uh, and rediscovered Pokemon. So I think that's the number one reason that we're seeing this insane boom, which actually, let's move on to the second part of the graph. What is that called?
All right, so let's just jump into the graph. Let me do a
I
quick
like the graph.
explanation.
I like
Yeah.
visuals.
Okay. So let's zoom in right here, and I will. So
Institution.
this would be your traditional graph of a bubble. Now, we're going to try to apply this as basic as possible to kind of what we saw in the collectibles market and the Pokemon market as a whole. So just to give you an idea, right here, this axis is your valuation. This would be like your prices. And this is your time. So over time, kind of how things progress. So you start out here, and I'll actually demonstrate this. So you start out here in this area right here. I would say this was probably about our March time. March, April, we kind of started right into COVID. We had saw some prices increasing. I remember one of the big things that people were talking about around this period of time was when SM Pratt sold that PSA 9 first ed Charizard. It was like $10,000. We
Mm-hmm.
saw Typhlosion T17 starting to spike up. Those had rocketed. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's going to the moon. We saw a crazy price for a 10, crazy prices for the 9. That was right in here, your March, April, maybe even May. Then we had a little bit of a dip come down. This is what here would be called the bear trap. So this is kind of where the people, the bears of the market, the people that are negative on the market saw, oh, this is just temporary, it's not going to stay. And you see that the market does decline slightly right here.
And that was the
Now,
fear of what was happening in the economy. I mean, we saw the stock market drop to 18,000
yeah.
points.
Mhm.
I sold before that, seeing that, I was all happy go lucky because I thought I timed it perfect.
Mhm.
So we got stuck in that bear trap right there, uh,
Yes. So,
which,
yeah, so this part of the graph right here is what they call the smart money. This is the investors that got in well before everything. They saw the trend occurring before it happened. Now, this here they generally call the institutional investment or the institutional money. That's usually why you see that bear trap there, is because they kind of write that media, that public narrative, oh, woe is us, things could be bad, whatever. That allows them to then get into the market and inject their money into the market on the way down so they
mhm.
can get it cheaper, getting ready to then ride this wave
Well,
up.
it's interesting
Now,
that it's named institutional money, right? That's how you
Mhm.
described it because we have seen many startups pop out of the woodwork here based off of collectibles, whether it's a stock market type app or it's a marketplace app or it's
Mhm.
a investor type app. Mostly
Mhm.
apps from what I'm seeing, but
Yeah.
it fits in perfectly with the description of institutional money because we've
Well,
seen a
and
lot of these pop
even in
up.
this time, CGC started grading cards right around August, which I would say was kind of right around the start of the bigger growth
Hmm.
cycle. But there were rumblings. They had put out a little teaser video, so this had probably been in the works for a while prior to that,
Hmm.
which would place them maybe more in that smart money category, maybe even prior, seeing that a growth was beginning and occurring and injecting themselves in. So the institutional investment, and that's more of like a stock market related term in terms of like hedge funds and things like that.
Right.
But
And it fits perfectly.
it,
I mean, it's exactly,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It doesn't even have to be direct investment, right? It can
right.
just be service industry type things that want to also capitalize on that growth. We've also seen those, I'm sure many of us have seen the Facebook ad pop up that talks about the fractional shares that you can buy into collectibles now. You can buy fractional shares of a card, things
Yep.
like that. And those are all things that are trying to kind of capitalize on this wave. Now, I would say our big point where things started to change, and this is in the category of public. So this is when the media perception starts to shift. Maybe the media was a little negative at the bear trap, and then it starts to get really positive. This would be when, you started to have like the Logan Paul type
Well,
effect. Logan Paul and
it started with Gary Vee. It started
yep.
with some more traditional kind of lesser known, I guess,
Hmm.
celebrities. And then
Yes.
yeah, right in the middle of that, where
Mhm.
I mean, just based off your drawing
Right
skills
about
here,
here is
that's
your
Logan
Logan
Paul.
Paul, if I had
That's
to
Logan
guess.
Paul,
Yep.
which is something that I have seen for years to happen. I
Mhm.
was DMing that guy 2018. He had Pokemon in his videos. He got that Squirtle tattoo.
Mhm.
I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I got scared and sold in fear before this, but I saw this coming, and I mean, it had a clear effect on the market. A clear
Oh,
effect.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is kind of why you see like this area right here, this box. This is kind of what in like stock market Bitcoin things when you have this graph go up like that, that's kind of what they call the parabolic growth when it
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely does this just you could draw a little rocket ship right here and it's the rocket ship trail right to the moon. The problem is with parabolic growth, there usually has to be some level of drawback. So I really want to focus on this part of the graph just for a second, specifically because when this first started happening, I actually was pretty vocal that I thought we could be in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And bubble is a relative term. It doesn't mean all of Pokemon. Maybe it just means a subset of Pokemon. In this case, it was heavily concentrated in vintage. Eventually, that did spread to kind of Pokemon as a whole. But, you know, I was pretty adamant that I had seen a trend like this occur once before in my lifetime. And I'm sure it's happened more and I just didn't really recognize it because I was younger, but in Bitcoin. And
Mm-hmm.
I had seen a very similar growth rate. This would have been your June, July. Things started to wane a little bit in August. Things really started to pick up around September, and then the media took hold in November, and it just catapulted until December, and then it went down.
Lost signal.
But Bitcoin took hold right here. It started to spike up, drop down, absolutely. And then, it fell off a cliff. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, I kind of felt like I've seen this pattern before, right? I've kind
Mm-hmm.
of seen this ebb and flow. I started to really do heavy research into, other bubbles, the tulip bubble, which is kind of considered the first bubble, that we've ever experienced, .com bubble back with like pets.com. Amazon was in that bubble actually.
Mm-hmm.
um even things kind of that relate more to our industry with the comic book bubble, the sports card bubble, things like that. And a lot of these trends worked very, very similar ways. In fact, if you're out there right now, I highly, highly implore you, go research the comic book bubble of like 92, 93. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. But let's jump back into the
Fascinating.
graph. So what was that?
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
Um,
Fascinating.
well,
So
before,
let's jump back into this graph then.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I just want to state, school's important, guys, but I find school more important for relationships and building that growth. And it just sucks that this is correct. I mean, and like you said, it's
Yeah.
repeatable in many other industries. I mean, this is what you learn in school when you go to economics 101, and unbelievable. But continue.
And and the reason that this works is because it's so hard to break out of it, even when you know it's occurring. And we'll get into that. But let's finish kind of the cycle that we saw. So we saw the Logan Paul come in, we saw the growth.
Lost you again.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I am sorry. This is my fault. My camera overheated. I adjusted the settings to make this a more enjoyable experience for you, and it actually made it a less enjoyable one. So yay to me. But
Please send your applications for new co-hosts to pokeradarig@gmail.com.
there you go, right there. Anyways, so let's jump back in and see if we can actually finish this graph. Okay. So to recap, what was an hour for us, but maybe like 4 seconds for you guys. We did the Logan Paul effect. We had the major spike. Now, this is the part of the graph that is probably the most contested by the average person. This was the one that even when some of us started to kind of get on this train of maybe the market could be in a bubble, things like that, or individual sections of it, that people wanted to kind of refute that this was ever going to happen, that cards would ever go back down. We are just going to go to the moon forever. Well, we didn't. The moon actually also came down like an asteroid. And so this right here, these two sections of this line are usually called your your delusion right here. So this would be where you're kind of delusional with regards to the way the market is headed, the odds that things actually go down. And I think we saw that in the market. I think we had a lot of people that refused that prices could ever go down. They would write all these narratives as to why prices were never going to go down. The 25th anniversary Pokemon Snap 2's coming, whatever. They could make up anything, right?
Hmm.
And the reality is, though, none of those things are guaranteed. First of all, we haven't even heard about Pokemon Snap 2 since they announced it. It didn't come out for the holiday season this year. We don't even have a guarantee that it's coming next year. Those kind of things. And so people will write a narrative to justify it because they're acting out of emotion. They're not looking at the data, right? The data says if something just has astronomical growth because of a large injection of people, those amount of people would have to maintain. And eventually, just over time, people will kind of phase out, whether they find something new to do or run out of money or whatever. So we ended up seeing this. And then what happens is you start to have this dip down here. And this is what's called the bull trap. So this is where those people that were kind of delusional that the market could ever drop. Yep, exactly. So the bulls and the bears here. The bull trap. This is where things start to kind of drop back down. And then you have another market push. People convinced like, oh, the market's going to recover. It's going to be fine. It was just unlimited base Charizard. Look at Neolugia. It's $122,000 now. Blah, blah, blah. Even though that's one sale. And then look what happens. You have that little spike up. So people start spending money again. This is when your smart money people back from over here are now unloading whatever remaining positions they had. This is when I don't like to use the term dumb money. I usually just use uninformed money, but you hear it a lot in like economics articles that they'll refer to dumb money,
Hmm.
that this is when they would be buying in, right? This is when kind of Bitcoin hit that 16,000. It was at 20, dipped down to like 16, popped back to 18. It's a very similar idea. And then it fell all the way down to like 2 grand. And,
So
so
this is where we
I'm
are
not saying
today.
that we're going to do this, right? This
Right.
is we
Where?
haven't happened yet.
Yeah, this is where we are today. We are,
Somewhere in here,
somewhere
probably.
in there, in that bull trap, maybe at the peak. I don't know. We don't know. We're in that area.
Yeah,
Um,
estimated.
and just to ignore that right side right there, as dramatic as this graph might look, it's pretty legit. I mean, if you look at a PSA 9 base set Charizard at the beginning of this graph, what were they selling for in January, February? 300 bucks?
Not much.
200 bucks?
Yeah.
They got to the moon, $8,000, and they dropped down. I'd say they even dropped down. I mean, this is again a specific card, but it dropped down back to what are we at? 2,000, if that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Which is still
oh, it's
growth, right? And,
phenomenal.
and this is
It's
and this is something I want to touch on actually,
yeah.
because a lot of people are going to say, well, right here you see kind of like your line of average. That's that dotted line there. And the despair even tends to fall below that and then recover. And we saw that Bitcoin, it fell to 2K and then kind of flatlined at 4K for many years until, what's happening this year.
Hmm.
But the thing to know is there are examples of this. So one of the things that I invested in this whole process in was first edition base set. There were cards that I bought in first edition base set. I can give you an example of like a PSA 7 Raichu for, I think it was like 350 bucks.
Hmm.
And it was right around this period here. And now we're seeing some of these complete on auction for 300 to 250.
Yep.
Like super low, not like so those numbers are literally lower than the mean of what they were at, in this part here. And this
Right.
is kind of where the reason I want to talk about this, even if we never hit here, even if it doesn't kind of play out this, we don't have this massive crash, the massive despair. And I actually will talk about this with the future part, but I want to talk about this because this can actually create a fantastic buying opportunity. A lot of times people think when things are crashing, you don't want to acquisition, you want to try to catch the falling knife at the bottom, blah blah blah. But what happens is when you blow past that line of average, and this is why keeping data is so important. If you recognize that some of these cards are falling below where this whole thing started at, well, that just doesn't make any sense because there was enough organic interest before all the inorganic interest to have the prices there. And so what it means is there's probably some type of despair or fear or overcorrection where people are freaking out and just, massive dumping to where some of those things can actually be good buys. Even if they only adjust back to the mean, you
Hmm.
could have steady, healthy gain there. And that's kind of a great example of how you can have opportunity in any market. And whether it's up, down, sideways, whatever. And so this graph is far less about trying to cause panic and fear and far more about just understanding the ebb and flow and the processes that money goes through when it's tied with emotion, which is what this whole thing is based on. Nostalgia, you talked about it with people getting in with COVID and like kind of, going back and having that nostalgic feel and wanting to relive those things and all that. This is what happens with money when nostalgia is at play. Now
Hmm.
there are many other things at play that influence this, but I always like to watch this area because you can even do this on a micro scale with just individual cards and find some fantastic returns and gains, whether it's in a big wave like this, whether it's speculating on a card for competitive play or anything like that. So graphs like this are always really interesting to watch. And if we think we're somewhere in here, this tells you that there, maybe it won't happen, but that there could be a big dip on things. But it also means to keep an eye on those things because there could be an acquisition period. And
Hmm.
this period might not last long, but this, depending on how, informed you are with the market, if you can recognize this, you may even be able to make a sizable sum of money with a very low risk factor because, I mean, there's not much between zero and here.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, like you said, this graph here is to showcase kind of the average, I guess. Hey, there's his face. I missed it. Um, by the average of the entire market, and like you mentioned, that PSA 7
Mhm.
Raichu, and that's actually an opportunity that I have an eye on as well as those PSA 6 to 8 first edition hollows. They're kind of ahead of, I guess, the average of the market. So there's an opportunity there, at least in my eyes. And
Mhm.
although I'm still sitting on some that I bought beforehand, I still think it's a
Mhm.
great time to pick some of those up. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on where we're headed. Um, are you in tune? Like, do you think we're gonna go right along with this graph here? Is it gonna be that dramatic? What are your thoughts? What's gonna happen here?
So it's tough because there's so many different sectors of the market at play, right? That we've pretty much done the exhaustive cycle of vintage this year. We've seen it where, if we assume that the Neo Genesis Lugia sale and all of that that's playing out right here is this, but those are singles. Sealed product does its own thing, right?
Hmm.
And we've seen retraces on that too. Base set boxes hit 30K. Now we watched them dip to like 20K. Maybe they pop to 25, then maybe they go to 15. Who knows?
Hmm.
But there's different sectors of everything. And then just with singles, then you've got vintage singles, and that's its own graph. Then you've got
Right.
modern singles, that's its own graph.
PSA
And those
tens are their
different
own graph, and yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah, exactly. And there's so many nuances and so many different things, and that's why it can be really tough to tell. And so before I even jump into that, one of the points I wanted to make, it was probably right before the camera died, is the the emotion of all of this. I kind of made the brief point of it even when it's happening, it's hard to disengage yourself from it because, if you sell a card at, $10,000 and the next week it's $12,000, that's a hard pill to swallow. Even if it at some point it may go back to 8. Because what if you could have sold it at that 12? What if you could have sold it at that 14? And I think this is something both you and I, in our own discussions have went back and forth on, of like struggled with I sold my 9 Charizard at 30, it was right around 35,000. And everyone was saying they're 40, now they're 50, and I was pretty pleased with mine because I was relatively confident that this was going to occur.
hmm
And this isn't like I'm the best, but it was one of those. I used the information I had at the time.
hmm
I made a strategic play and I sold it. And I still wasn't confident in those 50K sales when they were occurring.
hmm
And I knew that I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. Now we're seeing that those are kind of hitting back at that 35K mark, even if you were going below that on Instagram. And so maybe I pulled the trigger a little early and maybe I could have gotten that 40 or 50, but what if I didn't? What if I missed that boat and then they start tailing down and maybe my 9 copy isn't as good as the other 2 9 copies on the market, so I have to wait for those to sell and now I'm always behind the gun on the stair steps. And that's kind of one of those, you know, sometimes it just pays off to make the move when you have the opportunity to make the move instead of always, like I said, down here trying to catch the falling knife
Right.
or, up here, trying to hit the peak. You can't time the market. So you have to do what is, best with the information that you have at the time. And even when you're in that cycle, I think there were a lot of us that eventually kind of right around this Logan Paul area, we watched the Jigglypuffs and the Pikachus and the,
Yeah.
the crazy cards at these crazy prices. And we knew exactly what we were in. And yet in some regards, we still got sucked into it
Yeah.
because that's why it exists. Even when you know it exists, it's hard to break out of that mold because you're now going against the grain of what everyone else is doing.
Right.
So in that regard, I think where we move forward, it's tough to tell. There is the 25th anniversary next year. I I also hate that because it's a narrative that people write to justify all this stuff that could happen, but we have
Right.
no guarantee. We don't know anything Pokemon's doing for the 25th anniversary other than those promo cards and that they may have a set near the end of the year that's been speculated on, kind of like what they did with Evolutions in 2016, and that we have Shining Fates coming early in the year. Other than that, we don't know anything. Maybe Pokemon Snap 2 does come. Maybe they put another balloon in the Macy's Day Parade. Maybe they do a Super Bowl commercial like what they did in 2016, but we don't have guarantee of any of that.
Hmm.
And so from my perspective, I can't make strategic investments or strategic plays with things that I have no guarantee that they're going to happen because that's me wanting it to happen, not it actually happening.
Hmm.
So I my biggest prediction, and you could chalk this one up on the board, maybe call me out whether I'm going to be right or wrong, but my biggest prediction for next year is going to be that there are going to be a lot of these stories. There's going to be a lot of these narratives that are written, whether it is Snap 2 or Christmas next year or Super Bowl commercial, 25th, whatever,
Hmm.
that people are going to write these narratives to justify price increases, no matter where we're at on the graph or whichever, individual sector you take. And maybe even the collectibles market as a whole, not just Pokemon, but video games, sports cards, everything. They're going to write these narratives. But then we're going to get into this point kind of right around here, which would be your delusion, your that kind of thing, where they start to recognize that turn. They start to recognize that maybe some of these narratives weren't going to come true. And I think we saw this on a micro scale,
Yeah.
right? We had heard the three big ones: Pokemon Snap 2, Christmas coming, 25th anniversary, prices at Christmas are going to go to the moon. They retraced well before that, and they're still retracing on many things. I think we hit that on a bigger scale in 2021 somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I think it's going to happen. I think people are going to realize we promised ourselves rainbows and butterflies. We look through these things with, rose tinted glasses. And next thing we know, a lot of this isn't coming true. We're starting to realize it doesn't come true. And that's when you see the hands start to try to make the moves as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
And as all those people's wheels start turning at the exact same time, you see the cog of the bigger machine move a lot faster. And when that machine starts moving faster, that is when I think we could see maybe our bigger drop of the market as a whole.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've seen the big drop yet. I think we've seen the drop on some things. I think we're still seeing growth on other things. There's going to be opportunity everywhere, but I'm definitely going to play 2021 reserved, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, I mean, it's important. We've kind of talked about the dangers of chasing the right time. It's just like day trading stocks. You can't do that. You'll go crazy. You'll lose everything. It's dangerous. But I
Mhm.
mean, one thing that I'm sure you are doing and I am doing is I'm buying and selling into every point of this market. And
Mhm.
a lot of us educated, well experienced Pokemon sellers are doing that. That's what businesses do. That's what they have to do. You have to buy and sell continuously. So you just need to use all that information, like you said, that you have, not only on just general economics, but on the cards themselves and the sets themselves, and try to optimize your buys, and what you're selling at that time. So, yeah, it's not like we're gonna see just everything on the market and it's gonna stay there forever, because there's gonna be people picking stuff up. People have buy prices, people have sell prices, and it's gonna keep on flowing. It's not gonna stop. Um, but yeah, I'm curious to see the 2021 Pokemon market as well. I something that happened this year for me. I've always been so well in tune with vintage. I felt like I could close my eyes and see exactly where things were going. I understood it so well. It was
Mhm.
clear, it was healthy, and I could make a purchase and just not think about it. And I do fine because I just understood it so well.
You know how long it's going to take to sell. You know exactly,
Exactly.
where to
And
find the customer base,
right.
your
And
margin, everything. Yeah.
exactly. And with modern, I had no idea because I wasn't really involved. And also, I just wasn't sure of what was going on with it. And that completely flip flopped this year. Vintage is all over the place, up and down, the most volatile market I've ever seen in Pokemon. And I have slowed my buying down a lot on vintage stuff because of that. It's
Mhm.
it's it's unreadable. I mean,
Mhm.
you're probably one of the the most experienced people in this hobby. I like to consider myself a pretty experienced person in this hobby as well. And yeah, it's just unreadable at this point. I mean, the amount of people asking me, should I buy this? Should I buy that? Where's this going? Where's it headed? I don't know. I mean, there's been times where I am more than confident in saying, giving you my piece of information and telling you where I think it's headed. But my answer right now is I don't know.
Well, and everyone wants the crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's just, magic 8 ball. Where's the market going? And it's going to tell you, ask again later, because it doesn't know either. Nobody knows. And that's the thing. That is 100% the thing. Anyone that tells you they know the market, they try to sell you, they know the market, they can tell you exactly what's happening now. Where were you 6 months ago? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Where were you to tell me that Neo Genesis Lugia was going to be $122,000, and why didn't you have like 50 of them? You know what I mean? Like, there's probably only like 27 of them, and that's why. But like, that's the key. No one knows. But I think the flip side of that, because sometimes when we think, well, nobody knows what's going to happen, people get lethargic. People just kind of sit on their laurels. Just because no one knows doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to figure it out. Right. Even if we're never going to be able to figure it out. A lot of us were able to navigate this whole process much better because we were always crunching numbers. We were always, compiling data. In our Discord, we had a tab open where we were literally just talking about hot sales. If somebody was going, because we can't see everything all the time, right? Thousands and thousands of sales a day. So if somebody saw a relevant sale on eBay, they'd post it up and we would go in and, then other people could see it. And it was kind of a way for us to aggregate all of our data together. One of the things when CGC came out, my sales data doesn't pull up in sold listings on eBay because of the way my store is set up. So I would post it up there, and we were aggregating and pooling our data so that we could come up with trying to figure out this market and navigate this market together as a whole. And so I absolutely agree. I don't think we can know where it's going to go. I don't think anyone could have seen COVID happening this year and having the influence that it did. I think we would have seen a lot of this growth and this trajectory happen. I think it just accelerated everything, right? I think it just made everything happen faster than what it would have. And so while we can't predict it, we should always be trying to figure out where it's going to happen. And that's why it's so important to, have these conversations and watch these videos and, jump in a Discord call and chat with other people and get their perspectives. Because I'm not right about everything. You're not right about everything. And sometimes just getting other people's perspective really helps, in kind of piecing that puzzle together, because you also just get a perception of what's the greater community thinking about this stuff? What's the greater community? How are they navigating it? When the tried and true statement of like, when the market's fearful, get greedy. When the market's greedy, get fearful. I think that there was a very clear point when the market was extremely greedy. When we would have people that were on 1,000% gains for a card, they'd be holding out for another 50% on top of that, and that's just like a red flag of like, just sell. If you would have been offered half of that 6 months ago, you'd have taken it in a heartbeat. And so, for me, I love your point about saying it's okay to say you don't know, and I'm in that same boat. I do not know. I would have never guessed 120,000 Lugia. Would you have guessed 150,000 Lugia this year?
Not this year, no.
Someday.
Definitely someday.
You are the permanent bull. Your Pokemon someday, everything $1 million.
Look, these prices to me, they're shocking in 2020, but they're not shocking in general. I knew that they were going to hit this point eventually. It's a shock that it happened so quick. And I mean, to completely go against what I just said on all the vintage stuff, for modern 2021, for all these exciting new releases, I'm extremely confident in how well they're going to do at release.
Okay,
at
good.
release.
Ooh, I was getting nervous at release. Fair.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we see crazy numbers with bulk, and I mean, just the amount of printing that they're doing is incredible, and the amount that's being held and kept sealed and ripped open, just astronomical numbers in all sectors. But I see a very strong 2021 for modern, for stores, for Target, Walmart, everybody that's selling the new releases. They're going to do great. I am definitely worried about the local LGSs with, that survive on bulk. I'm worried about, and you could probably speak more about that than I can, because I pretty much just took that from you.
That's probably a whole other podcast topic.
Yeah, but
because there we would, we could just break down the whole construct of
Yeah.
bulk, the underlying of the mark, all of that. But I agree
Yeah,
with you.
but
I agree.
modern for 2021 is going to be extremely exciting. It's going to be fun for everybody opening, collecting, reselling, grading. Um, but of course, I have no idea how long that's going to last. So, I mean,
And
if that Evo 2.0 set comes out, I cannot wait to rip through a couple cases for myself. That was
yes.
some of the most fun I had when Evolutions 2016 came out.
Give me the
Um,
hodgepodge of the Neo sets,
you know,
the best of Neo. Just do it. Give me, all
yeah,
the shining, including Magikarp and Gyarados in the same set. Do it.
That'd
Why
be
not?
that
Let's
would be
do it all.
incredible. I mean, and they can mix in, obviously they'll mix in their full arts and different new rarities like that. So I'm excited to see what they do. They've done such a great job at catering to the collector market as well as the player market lately. So I'm very happy with what Pokemon's doing, and I see a strong 2021 for modern. Um, to touch on that graph again, where we're seeing that kind of the where we're at today, you mentioned that we're getting this new increase in Neo, right? With Lugia being 120,000. We're not really seeing the boxes follow yet. But we have to remember that this all started with base set, Logan Paul base set. It flowed into Jungle and Fossil a little bit. It never really hit the gym sets very much. And then it kind of just skipped over and hit Neo. We haven't even done the e-reader sets yet, and
Mhm.
we've just started to touch on gold stars. I did that video with Steve Aoki
Yeah.
and PokeRev and Rhyme Style and PokeRand. So there's different eras that have yet to see this type of spike, and that's where I kind of have a comfort in this period of time with the market. That we have some time of
Yeah.
solid of some growth still
Mhm.
and some leveling
And,
out.
and
But
and so that's the tough part, right? Is there time of growth? And this is something that we don't have the answer,
this is
but
my
we're trying to
delusion,
figure out.
probably.
Correct. Is it delusion? Is there that time of growth, or is this us just trying to push the market
Hmm.
that much further up this graph than it's already went? And there's a good argument, I think, for why maybe we don't have that time. And I want to touch on this real quick. Let's zoom back in here on the graph. And if you look right here, the reason I think that Lugia could be a bull trap is because of something you just mentioned. The boxes haven't reciprocated that growth. If Lugia maintained that 122,000 price point, you would think the chase of being able to pull a 6-digit card out of a box would reflect and the price would skyrocket accordingly, right? We saw first ed Charizard spike, first ed boxes spike. We've seen all these other rocket cards and everything spike. Those boxes spike, in tandem.
Hmm.
And we're not seeing those neo boxes spike. And if we think about what drives markets, a lot of it is your emotional, nostalgic appeal. A lot of people had exited the game around or prior to Neo.
Hmm.
They fell off prior to that. One of my last few sets was the Neo sets, and then Legendary Collection Starter decks came out, and I dipped. I
Hmm.
went to Yu-Gi-Oh! And so if we start to think about where people's nostalgia lies, it's probably more in those first 4 to 6 sets, maybe up to like your Gym Heroes Gym Challenge, and then starts to wane.
Hmm.
And maybe this Bull Trap, the Lugia, is more of a trying to push the next envelope higher, in that those cards do tend to have lower populations in the pop reports. So they are harder to find. So when one does come up, everybody drives on it thinking that's going to be the next thing.
Hmm.
But where boxes, while they're not super accessible, they may be more accessible, or more, more of them on the market at one given time. And that's why we haven't seen them drive, is because there really isn't that much desire or drive outside of the breaker community, breaking them
Right.
for YouTube videos and things like that. And so, but on, you can always flip side that too, right? The gold star started to spike, and now we've also seen a lot of those boxes from that era spike. They're starting, a lot of them are selling, but we're seeing, people
They're
putting
not.
evaluations on
Yeah.
XDeoxys and Team Rocket Returns and all those at crazy high prices. And this is why it becomes so hard to tell, because
Hmm.
Neo is more following this graph, whereas the EX era is telling us, well, we've got growth to go. So
Right.
which is it?
Right.
And I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, and that's why I'm playing it more hesitant, because I would rather be on the safer risk side, where I lost opportunity because I didn't get this, but I didn't lose real money because I'm selling into this.
Hmm.
And instead keeping some of that cash liquid to try to buy into something like this, with the reality that Pokemon is a household name across the world. It expands cross-cultural boundaries, and that this will probably happen again in some fashion with some sector of the market. And I would like to have money right here and not have a ton of cards right here.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Interesting.
are you excited for next year? Scared for next year? Mix of both?
I mean, I'm in such a weird place because I moved my money into trophy cards, which
Mhm.
happen to be the most controversial blep from our blips and blep uh, last or first episode, last episode. Where your blep was? Do you remember what word for word?
It was something along the lines of that trophy cards are some of the riskiest investments you can make, biggest bait type investments you can make, and all, so that's kind of how we've decided, by the way, for all the viewers out there, that we're going to structure this as, 2 episodes a week. One of them we do blips and bleps. The other one we take whichever one was the most popular or controversial or that people wanted to hear about and kind of explain it out, discuss it. So that's the one that we both got the most comments on.
Not the
And I
pizza.
just want to start with a clarification. I had a few people that thought I was slighting you with the blep, that I was going after you because you do trophy cards, and it actually was none of that. And because I actually think you've navigated handling trophy cards incredibly well,
Thank you.
better than what most do. And so the reason that I feel that they are risky is because it's a very certain niche type of investor that can put money into those cards and do them correctly well with the correct amount of risk tolerance. And that's the key, the risk tolerance. Putting your money in it to where if they go stagnant sideways or go down or whatever, that you can weather that and handle it. But also because it's much harder to have massive growth percentage wise, on a card like that.
Hmm.
We talked about the illustrator in our last episode. 350,000 sales, 370,000 currently on the market, $900,000 trade valuation. Even if you take that gap, that, let's say it's 300%. We have cards this year that have went 1,000%,
20
right?
more. Yeah, more.
Yeah, you can't get that kind of percent on a card like that.
Mm-mm.
But it doesn't matter because on 300%, you're making, 500 and some $1,000,
Hmm.
right? So you're trading percent growth for cash growth.
Hmm.
The problem is that cash number growth only works once you hit a certain threshold where you can make that trade-off.
Hmm.
A lot of people they see the big dogs in the community going for these trophies and getting in on them, and so they get enamored by it and they want to do it too because they see, well, that's, these people that have made it, that's what they're doing, so that's what I need to be doing. But the reality is they didn't see the 8 to 10 years of grind of flipping the little stuff, flipping the shit that nobody wants to flip. They didn't see all of that up to that point,
Hmm.
right, to where they could get to where they could do those things in a healthy way. And so I that's why I think they're one of the biggest risks or biggest bait of the hobby, is because people get enamored by getting this one big thing. But let me give you an example, right? Say you buy a trophy card right here on our graph at the top, and then the market goes, let's just say it goes sideways. Let's say it doesn't even fall off a cliff. And that card was 80% of your liquidity, your cash liquidity. So let's say you had $50,000 and you put 40,000 in a trophy card. Well, now with it going sideways, unless you want to take a break even or most likely a loss just after fees and shipping, plus the risk of the transaction and holding a card like that and it getting lost in the mail or scammed or whatever, you now only have $10,000 to work with. Well, what if a $20,000 collection pops up right here and now you don't have your cash to work with, and that $20,000 collection is worth $100,000?
Hmm.
So now your investment that flatlined right here because you didn't have the liquidity to not only invest in that but to keep the operation going, your investment here that probably won't make you anything or maybe even lose you money could have cost you an $80,000 net gain over here if your 20K collection goes to 100. And sure, that's a hypothetical,
Hmm.
right? But that's the whole like risk tolerance thing that you have to weigh out. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught, not even just with big trophy cards, but some of these mid-tier ones, Championship Arena, or, I saw a lot of people buying victory cups when they
Hmm.
were like $50 trying to get the $100, even though they had already kind of done their price movement, right? The 15 to 50 to 100,
Yeah.
that was your movement. You already missed the wave, do
Yeah.
something else. And so that is more kind of my thought on it, is assess the risk tolerance of these things and figure out where you're at. Just what the biggest fish are doing is probably not going to be what's right for you. And this is why it's great to have, all the different perspectives. That's what, kind of what I was talking about getting in the Discord and listening. It's great to have all those different perspectives, but at the end of the day, you still need to be able to look at your financial picture, where your money's at, how much you have liquid, and figure out what your individual risk tolerances are. Nobody can tell you those except a financial advisor out there.
Mm-hmm.
We are not those. We are
Mm-hmm.
not licensed financial professionals. This is all just merely our opinion. But other than a licensed professional, the only person that can tell you that is yourself. And so that's why you have to have a very good detailed picture. And the better you can get an understanding of the way markets move and the way money moves, the better then you can figure out, should I be going into these things or that kind of thing? And what happens if I get hung with this product or doesn't? One of the things, Radar, you and I have talked about a ton of times through this whole thing is different cards. Would I be happy if this went to zero tomorrow, or if I got hung with this card for 4 or 5 years or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and what opportunities would holding this card cost me? One of the things I mulled over this year, not Pokemon related, is I bought a first edition, first impression Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone softcover book.
Mm-hmm.
Paid about $7,800 after conversion fee for it, and I thought it's the right time to buy. I think the market's kind of flatlined a little bit, but we've started to see a lot more volume move at those prices, which usually means that supply will dry up and you'll see price growth. They're actually up to about 12 to 13,000 now in the respective condition I bought mine at. So
Wow.
almost a double up since then. But one of the things I had to ask myself is, this is a new market. It's a completely new risk tolerance. There could be even risks I'm not even factoring here because I don't know they exist yet. Is this something that, if I have to sit on this piece for X amount of time, or if I have to sit on this piece until, whatever, am I okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things that I really had to weigh out. And I set my targets. And this is everyone's lesson for the day. Set targets. When you buy an item, set a target up and down of where you would sell at. If it hits this threshold, I'll sell here. Or if it, drops to this threshold, I'll sell out and cut my losses. Or if it goes this length of time and hasn't performed, I'll reposition and sell it and put that money into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that you do that is it takes the emotion out of it. A lot of the things that I had set price targets on, the Charizards in particular, I had a bunch of first edition Charizards I sold this year. I set price targets on them. And that was huge for me because when this whole thing started to happen, it was much easier for me to pull the trigger on sales, even though I had a lot of birds in my ear telling me, don't keep going, keep going up. And some of those birds were my own,
Yeah.
right? But it was very important to do that. And now I look back and I'm most 94% pleased with how I navigated
Yeah.
everything. And a lot of it was because I could remove that emotion. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, when you set those targets and you put them down, put them on paper. Don't just put them in your head because you'll just argue with yourself. Put them on paper. And when you put those targets on both sides, up and down, it becomes much easier to navigate these things without the emotion seeping in. And it allows you to really assess that risk tolerance because your risk tolerance is going to change over time. So when you set your target at the start, you can always adjust it later. But if you
Mm-hmm.
don't set it at the start, you can't look later and be like, well, what would I have done then? Because your
Right.
cash flow is going to change, your inventory is going to change, and all of that. So that's what I do. I know we've had this conversation. I hope you've kind of started doing this with some of your stuff. We've
I
progressed
still
through.
I still throw my emotions in there more than you should, especially
Mhm.
doing this full time as a business. But I mean that's something that when I was first starting in the eBay world, Radar at Michigan State University selling crazy sweaters, it was
Mhm.
it was me buying things from thrift stores or garage sales or wherever. I would buy things that I liked and was okay with if they wouldn't sell. And that was always my mindset going in. And that's how I started with Pokemon. I think Pokemon's kind of turned into a whole nother beast, but um, yeah, I mean that's something that I still struggle with today. I mean, my take on trophies right now is, you know, in that market drop that we might see, that they'll fare much better. Again, like you said, they can only go up, so much up percentage wise. It'll be the same, going down in my opinion. It's just a risk tolerance and a mental tolerance of seeing larger numbers on a single card going up and down. Um,
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, how I've dealt with trophies myself, I'm in a unique position. I've built a brand, a very well trusted brand around myself here over the numerous years that I've been involved in the hobby and have an incredible network that I'm able to reach out to buy, sell trophies. Trophies are
Mm.
a long play. You
Yeah.
know, for someone that's not involved in the hobby, like any collection, Harry Potter, artwork, whatever, if a collector buys that piece and they don't have the avenue to sell, they're going to have to go to somebody with that avenue to sell. And there is a fee, a hefty fee that goes along with that. So trophies are a long-term play. And
Yeah.
as you said, at being a bait of a good purchase, you have to have the funds. You have to be readily and knowledgeable of the long hold, the long play with it, and understand
Mm.
how you're going to sell it in the future, set targets, do all that. So yeah, it's funny that that was such a big topic. I'm glad that we
Yeah.
did talk about it.
Controversy. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
and that's exactly why I think you have positioned yourself well, because not only have you created liquidity to buy these items and you know where you can sell these items, but you've created the network around it. You've kind of created that brand, that persona of someone that deals in these items and navigates it. So not only do you buy and sell them, but you can consign them, you can do all of these things. And that is actually why I think you have navigated it well.
mm,
A lot of people will just go out and buy one, sit on it. Now they've got 20,000 in this, and then you'll see them talking a few days later about how they're going to have to liquidate something to pay their bills and not realizing that the opportunity cost of holding this card is now costing them realized money on the other side because they're having to sell things for less than they're worth.
mm,
And that is the key. If you want to do trophy cards or anything that you classify as an investment, something on effectively set it and forget it until you're ready to sell. If you want to do anything, you have to make sure that it is something that you are liquid enough that you can do that and maintain everything else to where you can always, this is the number one goal in buy sell trade, whether it's flipping, investing, collecting, whatever, is that you want to position yourself to where you never have to sell something until you feel it is the prime time to sell. If you can put yourself in a position where you never have to move an item to pay a bill or to buy something, another opportunity comes along. If you can put yourself in that position to where you never have to do that until you feel it's the prime time, you will win more often than not, strictly just on being able to do that, than even having good technical analysis or anything else. Because when a market opportunity arises, you're already positioned yourself for it.
mhm.
So, and that's why I think you have been doing well. And it wasn't a slight against you, but why it it could be deemed as a slight against a lot of people that are
Yeah.
doing it, and it's because they haven't went through those processes yet. And some of that
Mhm.
is just the emotion, getting excited about it. Some of it is just inexperience in a market and learning. I would rather, by us doing these podcasts, just call a spade and not have them have to learn the hard way,
Yeah.
So that's for me.
Yeah.
I'm always gonna be more blunt to the point.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah.
I think that leads into to what we might talk about at our next podcast, kind of the conversation of investors versus true collectors versus resellers. What category do you fall within? Can there be real collect this the whole discussion about that topic because it's something that is brought up.
Can you collect and
Eh,
invest? Can you collect and flip or run a store and a business? Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So
And
I
this is one we have discussed a
yeah.
lot, went back and forth on, and we're like, this is actually what started the idea of the podcast was this conversation. So
Yeah.
if you're ever gonna watch through any of our videos, if you're even still here at this point, that's probably one you're not gonna want to miss.
Right. So check us out for that one next time, guys. We appreciate you greatly. Great support on the first episode with me and Squeaks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm loving this. This has been
Yeah.
minus all the technical difficulties you gave me today.
My bad.
Absolutely
We
loving
got it
doing this.
figured out though. We got to figure it out. I was accidentally recording in 4K.
Yeah,
So that,
bougie over here. But we'll see you guys next time. Be sure you hit that subscription button, that bell
yes,
thing,
please.
swipe up, do it all.
Yes. Subscribe to both of our channels. It really does help us. If you can take 2 seconds right now, 2 seconds, and just hit the little thumbs up button and go leave a comment. Even if you just put F for the camera overheating. That's all you have to do. It really does help us. It helps the search algorithm, which will help us then, rank higher, get more views. Therefore, then we can make you more content and provide you hopefully more value. So thank you all for the support so far. I mean, I'm having a blast with it. I'm looking forward to keep doing it as long as you are.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Squeaks, have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and
you as well, buddy.
we'll see you next time.
See y'all next time. And we'll just kind of wrap up, close out.
Gotta clear my throat for this.
Here's that.
This episode is sponsored by nobody.
Hey, do a check 1, 2, 3, 4 with me.
Check 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay. Well, that did.
A cookie. It's a Christmas star. All right, cool. Whatever, dude.
Sorry about that little cut.